In this video, we're going to be planning a breast using Field and Fields. Now, before we get started, a quick note on contouring. When doing a breast, left or right-sided, you always contour the heart. And what we do usually is we contour the pericardium, which is what we've been doing in all cases for this class. But pericardium, we want to start it superiorly where this vessel breaks up. You see where this vessel breaks right there? So right where that vessel breaks is where we start. Okay, and we contour the pericardium. And for a breast, it's very important that we get it right because there's a lot of vessels surrounding the heart that are important to protect. And we're going to be treating either through or very near the heart on this anterior left side right here if we're treating a left-sided breast. So we need a very accurate heart contour there. The LAD right here is an artery that's very important to protect, and you can see it on this patient pretty well, but it goes right here, right against the heart, and we want to do a good job protecting that. So the first way we protect it is by making sure our contour is correct. What else? The next quick note is the scar. So this is the first time we're going to be contouring out a scar and overriding the density. So you can see the scar here, and obviously this wire won't be there during the treatment, so we're going to get rid of it. So it's not really we're not getting rid of it so much for the photon plan. It's really not a big enough wire and not a big enough deal to worry about so much for the photon plan. It's not going to affect our planning, but it will make a big difference for our electron boost. So a lot of times you boost these breast plans with electrons. This particular one actually might be too deep to boost with electrons, but usually you want to try to boost them with electrons if you can before photons, and stuff like wires and BBs will really affect your electron plan. So that's why you just do it up front, get it out of the way with, so you're ready for that electron plan if you need to do it later. Anyways, what you should do is contour out that wire. You can see I've contoured out that wire, that scar wire, and you also want to modify the body. So I both contoured out that wire, I overrode the density, which I'll show you how to do here in a second, but then I also, the body included that wire, and it's a good idea to just do both. Clean up your body, contour out and override that wire. To override the density, you just come to the properties of that contour, you go to CT value and material, and you assign a CT value. In this case, we assigned a material air. So you have a lot of materials in here that you can use, air, and it'll assign your HU value, but you could also just type minus 1000 in. It's about the same thing. Okay, so let's get started. So a lot of clinics, the physicians they might add your fields or want to draw your blocks for you, and breasts, they can be planned very differently depending on what clinic you're at. So I'm just going to go over how we do it at Nebraska Medicine. A lot of the techniques and stuff you'll be able to adapt to however your clinic plans breasts, okay? And hopefully how I plan them and what I show you, it'll still cover most of what your physicians are looking for in your clinics as well. So at Nebraska Medicine, when we add our fields, we insert our plan like we always do, choose our breast PTV as our target. For now, I'm going to leave that at 6x. Okay, so my ISO, it's going to automatically put my ISO in the center of my breast PTVE. That E stands for eval. Really, that's just a habit I'm into from Nebraska Medicine. A lot of times the physicians will create a breast PTV and then create a PTVE or PTVE eval with the lung excluded and 5 millimeters off the body excluded, etc. But anyways, the ISO, it'll go right in the middle. I always leave my ISO there. I don't see any reason to move it from the center of my breast. Okay, and if you remember back to our whole brain plan, we talked about divergence, right? Divergence through the eyes. Divergence is very important for the breast too. So what we want to do is we can look at our PTV here, and as you rotate it, you can get a 3D view of your breast, right? It's this concave structure, right? So you can see your anterior side right here, your posterior side here. You can kind of rotate until those sides line up, right? You won't ever get a perfect, but you know, somewhere close, about like that. And again, the point is we want to treat the whole breast, but we want to spare as much normal tissue back here as possible. If I leave my field like this, you know, I have to open my field up to treat the breast, and then look at all this extra lung and tissue that I would have to treat for no reason. Same way here, if I open it up too wide, again, I have to open my jaw up this wide to get that posterior side, and then look, I'm treating through all this extra tissue for no reason. So you want to line that up so that the front edge and back edge of your PTV volume are about the same. Some clinics, they won't give you a PTV volume. They'll wire out the breast, and in this case, there are wires on this breast too. So you would contour out those wires and then rotate till your wires lined up. So you do kind of the same thing, just without that PTV. You would use your wires to line up. But okay, I think this angle should be about what we want. Okay, and so for this plan, what we're shooting for is not 100% to cover 95% of our volume like we usually do. We just want 95% to cover 95% of the volume. So, and one of the reasons why we do that is just the way the physicians contour the PTVs, it plays hand in hand with how we want to set up our fields. So we're going to set up our fields so that our MLCs are very tight medially against this PTV. We're not going to give any margin on this PTV. This is a good example of when not to use your standard abdomen. We're going to use chest down here because we can see bone still, but we can see soft tissue. And we're treating soft tissue, right? We're treating the breast, so it's a good DRR parameter set to use. I'm going to put my sup and inf border. I'm just going to give about a 0.5 cm margin, sup and inf. And another new concept is flash. So if you imagine treating a breast, this is a free breathing scan right here. So the patient is going to be breathing during their treatment, right? So their chest will be falling up and down, right? So we need to provide what we call flash, or a little extra room, so that if that patient takes a deep breath in and that chest moves out, that breast will still be within the field, okay? So we give at least 2 cm of flash. You know, a lot of times I give a little bit more if I can. So at least 2 cm of flash. I'm going to put my jaw right up against my PTV. And this is maybe a poor example of a PTV. This PTV is pretty kind of ugly and jaggedy. So I'm not going to follow those jagged spots exactly. I'm going to kind of just interpolate and generally follow the shape of that PTV. But again, in your clinic, maybe the physician will want to draw their own, or maybe you'll have those wires and you'll just follow those wires to draw your block shape. Maybe they have PTVs like this, but hopefully they look a little smoother. However you do it, it doesn't matter. You know, your field should look something similar to this by the time you get to it. Except one last thing. So we drew our initial block based on our PTV. I'm going to shut that off. I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to make sure my tumor bed is inside of my field, and it is. And I'm also going to look at my heart. So if possible, we want to completely block out our heart. We don't have too much in the field, so I think we'll be okay, but we'll be able to check that later. So I'm going to completely just block out that heart. All right. So if you notice, because we blocked that heart out, look, we're now missing parts of our PTV. But again, we only are shooting for 95% to cover 95% of our volume. So essentially, part of our PTV can be cold, and that's okay. But what we want to do is make sure our tumor bed gets 100% of the dose. Ideally, we have a min dose on our tumor bed of at least 100%, okay? So that'll be the tricky part, is getting that deep tumor bed covered. Once you have your first field set up, you can oppose it. And again, like our whole brain plan, we want to line up our fields. That medial MLC edge, the orange edge, we want to line up. So we're now dealing with a block that is not perfectly straight, and it's kind of curved. So as you scroll up and down, you usually can't get it to be perfectly matched up everywhere. So you can see here down at the bottom, it's not going to line up exactly. So you just got to find, I usually just go somewhere in the middle of the breast and get it to line up. If I had one of my beams diverging into the heart, maybe I would line up right here at the level of the heart. But you just got to do the best you can. And again, the point is we're trying to treat the breast but spare as much normal tissue as possible. This looks pretty good to start. A couple things you want to do on once you oppose your field, sometimes you need to adjust your sup and inf border. So again, if we're shooting for about a ½ cm margin, I can close both these down a little bit. And then I need to make sure I still have at least that 2 cm of flash. Sometimes you need to adjust that as well. Okay, our prescription is going to be 266 times 16. For now, I'm just going to set it at 95/95. That's the minimum coverage we want to get. For now, let's leave it at 6x and calculate. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is start playing with my weighting. So you can see it's a little bit unsymmetrical, so I want to even that out. I have this 107 spot over here, but none over there. Add a little weight medially. Oh, a little too much. Something probably like that. And again, you can't get it to be perfectly symmetrical sup and inf all the way up and down because the breast is not perfectly symmetrical, so your dose distribution won't be, at least to start with. That looks pretty good. But okay, so our coverage is good, symmetrical, but again, our coverage on our PTV is good, but we want that min dose on our GTV to be 100%. You can see our 100% line kind of breaks up in that GTV. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to normalize down a little bit. Whoops. First, I'm going to change my total weight to 1. There we go. Then I'll just normalize down a little bit. So let's see what 97 looks like. Still got that little cold spot right there on that GTV, so maybe 96. Maybe a little bit more than we need. See, 96.5. If we look at our tumor bed, our min dose is 99.9%. Just a little bit lower. There we go. We're above 100. Okay, so at that normalization, which is what we need to do to get our tumor bed covered by 100%, our plan is pretty hot, right? If we look at our 107 here, it covers a big portion of our field, right? And especially for breasts, For breasts, our goal is to get that max dose below 107, and we're even going to try to eliminate as much of the 105 as we can. So this isn't ideal to have this much 107. So what do you do about that? If I have this much 107, I start to think of using a higher energy, right? And we can also measure the separation. So if I measure the separation, so from the skin surface here to here, right about 24 cm. So right at that 24 cm mark is when I start to think about using a higher energy. That's my limit, 24. If it's less than 24, I really should be able to handle it with 6x. If it's 24 or more, I might need a higher energy. So this would be an ideal situation for maybe using 10x from both sides. Unfortunately, on this treatment machine, GVSU's treatment machine, 10x is not an option. So we have 6x or 15x. The problem with 15x, I'll just go ahead and show you real quick. 6x, we have very good superficial coverage right here, right? So superficial is good. 15x will help us get deep coverage, but let's just see what happens here. But you see, we lose all that. We gain some deep coverage, we lose a lot of superficial coverage. So if we look at our DVH, that line is so thick. Let me see if I remember how to make it not so thick. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So look at our coverage now. So we need 95 to cover 95%. Well, at 95% of our volume, we're only at 92%, right? So we just lose all that superficial coverage, which ends up adding up and being a lot. So 15 is just too much. Need to go back to 6. So we can't just change one beam to 15x. So we're going to start at 6x. Okay, we're going to try to plan this with 6x, and what we might need to do is just add in a little bit of 15x at the end. So essentially we'll copy a beam, change it to 15x, and just add a few percentage of that higher energy. But we'll see what happens with this 6x plan first. Okay, so think of this plan like any other plan. Okay, we can turn this 107, or you can do this one of two ways. If it's a really easy breast plan, again, I'm gonna try to get rid of as much 105 as I can. Ideally, I want less than 10% of my breast to be covered by 105 or more. So I need to get rid of a lot of that 105. So you could turn your 105 on and just immediately start blocking that with field and fields. Just like for all our other plans, we turn the 107 line on and start blocking. You can do that with this 105. This plan is going to be a little bit trickier with this tumor bed though. And on trickier plans in general, sometimes I just start with the 107 and then adjust them later to account for my 105. So I'm going to show you that way. Okay, it's just a little bit different than how we've been doing our other 3D plans. So I'm going to turn this 107 on. I know I have just the right amount of coverage that I need on my GTV, right? And it's on the deep portion of my GTV. So on the deep side of my GTV, which is right here, this is deep side, I know I'm just right where I need to be. So when I'm drawing these first few field and fields, I'm actually not going to block this deep part of the GTV at all. Okay, I'm going to avoid blocking that because I need to keep dose there. But otherwise, I'm going to start blocking this out, but see, I'm going to avoid blocking that deep part of that GTV. Again, avoid that GTV. The deep part of that GTV at least. So I have these skinny kind of 107 areas. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to my, so you can see on the second one here, they're here, but I have a little bit of a gap between my MLCs and where they're at. But if I go here, you can see they're right up against those MLCs. So if I just move a few of these a tiny little bit, I should get rid of that 107. I'm just going to go ahead and slide these two over. Try to get this to look a little cleaner. There we go. So I got rid of that. So I know this is on the other side, but it's a small area, so I'm just gonna grab it. So on a breast, when I'm looking at the 107 like this, I really only add 3% at a time on my field and fields, and it's because I'm going to edit them a little later on. And if I do more than 3% and then edit them later, I can get into some trouble. I can make some cold spots and stuff like that. So I really stick to 3% when I'm planning this way. And again, like I said, when you're doing a really hard breast, you know it's going to be tricky to meet all your objectives. I like doing it this way. I like to just worry about my 107 first, get rid of as much of that as I can. When you are first getting started with really all planning, it's definitely a good idea to go check your dose distribution every few field and fields. I tend to get pretty stuck on this view, and I don't do that just because from personal experience I know I'm gonna be kind of okay. But if you go back and look through and your 100 line is breaking up somewhere or something like that, you got a problem. but also in the beginning until you really start to get comfortable with it, that 3% rule, it should prevent you from getting into trouble most of the time. So you can see a few little spots, 107, are showing up where they weren't before. And it just has to do with, you know, how the calculation is coming out. But we're going to worry about those in a little bit. Some clinics will have rules on how many field and fields they want to add. If your clinic does, you know, you just have to kind of plan how your clinic plans. But I don't know. I would argue that you should use as many field and fields as you need to. Why not? Especially at this dose fractionation, 266 a day, all these field and fields, even at 3%, are, you know, around 5 MU or more. So it's not a super low MU per field and field. About all it does is it does, you know, obviously increase the treatment time a little bit. And if you're doing any breath hold treatments for breast, which are pretty common, then that can become an issue. And you will want to try to, for breath holds, we really try to keep it to like 5 field and fields per field, just for timing reasons. And if we need to go over 5, we do an ecomp plan, which I'll show you that in another video. Okay, so we have 6 field and fields per side. So we're right at that point where we'd probably strongly consider an ecomp plan for this breast, but it's also, I think, still reasonable to use our field and fields. We've got rid of all that 107 superficially, so this should be all the field and fields we need, hopefully. Now the tricky part. So now, how do we get rid of this hot spot right here by the GTV? First, what you should do is just check, again, sometimes based on how the calculation plays out, your total MU might have gone up slightly just based on those field and fields you added. You might have a tiny bit of room to normalize up and cool your whole plan down. So our min dose did go up slightly, but not a whole lot. It's still, our min dose is 100.7. So I'm going to leave our normalization as is. I'm going to try to just very carefully start blocking out this 107. So let's go back to our very first one, very first field and field. I'm going to make a few edits. First, I'll bring these two MLCs that were below my GTV over a little bit. I think our coldest spot is going to be like right on this slice. So I think I have enough room to bring this one over too. Maybe even that one. Let's see. Min dose did go down a little bit, but we're still over 100. Make a few edits here. Block some of this other 107 out that popped up. So that's probably all we can block from the lateral, from this way. We probably need to block using this medial blank, or this medial bank of MLCs. So it really doesn't matter which one we choose. We can do that from any. I usually just keep going down the line. So let's use this one. I also kind of keep an eye on all these other little spots. So anytime I can block one out real easily, I will do that. Like right here, just move these slightly to grab some of these spots. Okay, let's see how much we can get rid of here. So you can see it's kind of faint, but you can see our GTV right here. So we don't want to block that GTV, but we want to get as close to it as we can. Okay, so we are doing good. We're getting rid of most of that. But it's about at this point where, I make a decision. So it's still a pretty big cloud of 107. We're still over 110. And we definitely need it below 110. So I don't think I can keep this GTV above 100 and get rid of this. I just don't think it's possible. So what can we do? This is where we want to add a little bit of 15x. So how do you do that? So we need a little bit of higher energy to get a little bit deeper penetrating power, right? And cover this deep part of the GTV a little better. But we don't want too much 15x because then we'll lose all our superficial coverage on our PTV, right? So I hope I only need to do this from one side. So this GTV is a little bit more lateral than it is medial. So I'm going to take my lateral field. I'm going to copy it, change the energy to 15x, apply to only field F3. I only need one 15x field. Okay, and then before you do anything else, anytime you copy a field like that, it's going to steal an equal amount of weight percentage-wise from all of your beams. So you want to just zero that out. So if I zero that out before I calculate, now it's going to calculate that field 3, but it's going to have 0 weight. So our plan will look exactly the same after you change this field weight to 1. Change that field weight to 1, zero that out. You can see up here, our plan's exactly the same as it was, right? But now we have this 15x field. So I'm going to try to lock all my beams. I'm going to unlock that lateral. So I'm going to try to basically trade out a little of that 6x with 15x. I'm going to do just a little bit at a time. So let's do 5%. You can see this hot spot right here got cooler, right? Let's do a little bit more. Again, you see that hot spot gets smaller, right? But now our dose is a little uneven. So I'm going to unlock our two original fields, and you can see I need to add a little bit more weight to our lateral one. And again, it becomes uneven, not because we changed our total percentage from that side, right? We were just trading from one lateral beam to the other, but the energy changes is what makes that dose uneven. And you need to account for that by just adjusting, your initial weight a little bit. So it's looking pretty good, but let's see if we can get away with a little more. Even that out again. Looks pretty even. So you can see our total max dose went down, right? Because we added in that little bit of 15x. Our tumor bed is at 100.6. That's good. Let's see what happens if we start normalizing up a little bit. 100.3. See if we have room to add more 15x. So if we come here to 95, see 95%, we're right at 95%. Okay, so we really don't have room to add any more 15x. Any more 15x, the more 15x we add, the more superficial coverage we lose. Okay, so if we zoom in here, our 95% line is kind of right on our PTV, right? And so the more 15x we add, so you can see we're missing already some, right? So we add a little bit more 15x, we'll just lose a tiny bit more coverage. So we really can't add more 15x. We really can't block much more of this, but we'll try. So we're at 100.3. Let's see what happens here. Move a few more MLCs. Get them even closer, so we're starting to block some of that GTV. Our min dose is just really close. Still 100.2, it didn't budge. Try to get even more. So what I'm doing is I'm just going down the list and I'm just blocking out this hot spot little by little, right? So we're right at 100. Pretty much, this is what it is. So that is how I do this. If we want to completely block out the heart, right, and by doing that we block out a little PTV, if we were covering that PTV, maybe we would be able to add a little more 15X. You never know, but we're trying to get rid of as much 107 as we can. We're trying to keep 95/95 on our PTV. We're trying to block out the heart completely. We're trying to keep a minimum dose of 100 on GTV. So with all that in mind, I think this is about as best a compromise as we can get, right? Our max dose only 107.8, so just slightly over 107, but we've literally blocked as much of that as we can while keeping this GTV min dose at 100. And I can very confidently tell that to a physician based on how we did this, right? First, we got rid of most of the 107, and then we very, very carefully went through field by field, very slowly modified those MLCs to block as much of that 107 as we can, get our GTV right to 100. So that's how I do these, okay? The last step would be to just get rid of as much 105 as we can. But remember, we're right at the tipping point of our coverage that we need, right? Oh, so we're technically slightly below on our coverage. So since we're right there, I'm going to change this back to 95/95 just to make sure we keep that. All right, so that slightly heated up our plan. So our hotspot went back up to 108, but that might be the best we can do. Anyways, I turn my 105 cloud on now, and I do kind of the same thing. So I start with my first field and field, and I look for 105 that I can block out. I know we're tight on coverage though, so I'm going to kind of ignore this deeper 105 and look for other areas that we can start to cover. So maybe I'll move a little bit here, just block out a little more of that deeper 105. Right here, you can kind of see this line, right? So I'm going to follow that line, block out some of that 105. So I just need to maybe move a little bit. Might move some of those up there. Okay, so you can see we got rid of most of that superficial 105, but in so doing, we must have cooled off that breast a little bit. So our MUs had to go up a little bit to maintain this coverage, and our hotspot went back up a little bit. So Then what we could do is go back and once again try to move some of these MLCs to cool that back down. Under 0.5. Right back to 100. So 107.6 max dose, not too bad. Our GTV is still at 100. We know our PTV is covered 95-95 because we're normalized like that. So all those are great. Our heart, our max dose is 3075, so not too bad. Our mean dose is only 93 centigrade, so that's very good. Last but not least, if we come, I don't know, we can see up here. So if we go to 105%, about right here, so at 105% of our dose, our PTV or our breast, only about 5% is covered by 105, and we want that to be less than 10%. So all in all, this plan I think is pretty good. And really what I wanted to do was I wanted to show you guys how to plan a little bit more difficult breast plan. Okay, how do you kind of really fine-tune these field and fields and really nitpick out a plan to meet some of the constraints you need to meet. A lot of breasts are much easier than this to plan, and like I said, you can, if your GTV is, you know, in the middle of the breast, you really turn that 105 on from the get-go and start blocking that out just like we do the 107 for all our other plans. But if that GTV is really deep like this and you need a min dose of 100 on it, if you don't have 10x, if you have energy problems with your machine, you know, that well, not problems, just if you don't have, you know, a good intermediate energy on your machine, these can be pretty tricky. So I just want to show you how to plan, how to go about planning a little bit more difficult one, and kind of some of the things you could do to help you out with field and fields on these more difficult breasts. Really quickly, if we scroll through here, what you want to see on a breast, even though for class, at least we're shooting for 95% coverage, I still want to look at my 100% line, so this red line, and it should be whole. It shouldn't break up anywhere. In general, it should cover our whole treatment area. It should look very similar to what this looks like right here. I don't want to see it break up. I don't want to see it really bow too far into the breast. This is pretty typical dose arrangement, you know, that you'll see for a breast. It's 105, as long as you get it below 10% of the breast, you know, that's fine. Our hot spots are symmetrical, that's good. This is really what you want to see in terms of your dose distribution for a breast.